Hi there, I am Cotton and welcome to Cotton Hammer. Today's topic will be on Arkhan Land, one of the most famous and well-regarded members of the Mechanicum. Some would easily give him the title of legendary. But for what reasons? Let's find out. So, without any further faffing about, let's plunge into the catacombs of Mars and see what we can discover about this legendary explorer. So, who even is this Arkhan Land fella? And why does everything seem to be named after him? Well, let's first get back to the very beginning. So, there was this Big Bang and that created the universe. This made a lot of people really angry and has been regarded as a bad move. Then some unimportant stuff happened and then somewhere around the 30th millennium our boy Arkhan Land got born. Or grown. No way to really know for sure with the Mechanicum. He was extremely gifted. At the age of 5 he spoke 50 languages and dialects, including High Gothic, Low Gothic, Binary, C++, and Dutch. That last one might have been a software glitch that caused him to spout random nonsense. Not like you can tell the difference anyway. During his early life he is described by colleagues as an unparalleled genius, but also a massive arrogant dickhead. Problem was, he knew exactly how much of a genius he was, and one of his hobbies was to make sure you knew that he knew. Otherwise he had a very eccentric lifestyle, not giving a fuck if you thought it was weird what he did. It even went so far that he had, for a member of the Mechanicum, barely any cybernetic enhancements, holding more true to the belief that the human body is the embodiment of perfection, and that machines should be used to imitate that and help failing biological processes rather than just replace limbs for the heck of it. So you can see why other tech priests thought he was a fucking weirdo when he refused to get a vacuum cleaner installed into his leg. Apart from telling people exactly how stupid they were, there were only 3 things he cared about. First was his pet Psyber-Monkey, Sapien. Yes, Psyber. I didn't misspell cyber, but we're gonna talk more about Sapien later in this video, no worries. The second thing was that he was balding. He had an extensive collection of wigs to cover up his bald spots. Of course, it's still Arkhan Land we're talking about, so even his wigs had to be pretentious. The fancier and more eye-catching, the better. Thankfully, he stopped this habit quite early. Probably after one of his wigs got caught in some machinery. The third thing was his deep love and desire for deep, dark holes and caverns. I don't know what you're thinking about, but I am talking about caves.
Oh, thank God.
He became a techno-archaeologist who led multiple expeditions into the long and extensive underground cave systems and abandoned underground facilities of Mars itself. A lot of those facilities were lost, destroyed or buried during the Age of Strife, and only now was Mars stable enough again to be able to spare the manpower to send expeditions into those vast complexes to look for lost technology. Now, don't think of those caverns like some cave somewhere in Appalachia where someone tried to cook meth. These complexes were underground cities, not only spanning continents sized horizontally, but also vertically. Even now, in the time of the 41st millennium, not everything has been discovered. Both because those areas couldn't yet be reached, or have been reached and the entire expedition got lost. This is what we like to call foreshadowing. Anyway, at the dawn of the Great Crusade, he would start the expedition that would lead to his greatest acclaim to fame, the Librarius Omnis expedition. Now, the Librarius Omnis is, like the name implies, a library. But this library is also the size of a continent, and didn't just have books but also data slate, blueprints and of course standard template constructs, STCs. Arkhan's expedition took 3 years. Now, sadly, The goal of the expedition was to find a fully intact and complete STC database. In that regard, the expedition was a failure. But they did find the following. Raider Patton, main battle tank, later renamed to Land Raider. This would be first fielded during the Great Crusade as the Land Raider Proteus. Anti-gravitic plating, which would later be used for the land speeders, all variants. It's also worth to mention that the most sophisticated forms of this anti-grav technology were instantly claimed by our favorite golden boys, the Legio Custodes. They were a big fan of Arkhan Land, cause he's pretty much solely responsible for the entire arsenal of grav tanks and jet bikes. He also discovered the blueprints for the Land Crawler, a heavy utility vehicle used for farm and industrial work. Basically a tractor on steroids. And the Mass Universal Land Engine, i.e. Mule. It was named like that on purpose by Arkhan himself, because it was originally intended as just another utility vehicle, and Arkhan, being very interested in terror, had heard of some beasts of burden that would just refuse to work if they didn't feel like it, and he thought that was incredibly funny. This vehicle would later become the Onager Dune Crawler. He discovered much more minor technology and equipment, but it's just too much to list, which is why nobody ever bothered, cause I can't find a complete list anywhere. But by the established logic, he also discovered landing gear, land surveyors, and landscaping. Now, I want to take this chance to talk about something outside of the lore. A lot of people dislike Arkhan Land just for his name, because they feel it's one of the laziest retcons in history that the Land Raider and Land Speeder, which were perfectly fine names, suddenly need to have this grand history of being named after some legendary magos that apparently appeared out of thin air. So, is this actually true? Well, yes and no. First, is it a retcon? Per definition, no. A retcon is when you take established lore and change it completely. This is more of an addition. They didn't change the name, they just added an origin to it. But it's most certainly an afterthought. The Land Raider, for example, existed in the very first edition of 40K, also known as Rogue Trader, in the late 1980s, with no mention of Arkhan Land anywhere. But, on the other side, the introduction of Arkhan Land is also way further back than people think. People tend to think that it happened when Games Workshop started changing a lot of names around, like Imperial Guard became Astra Militarum and Eldar became Eldari. You get the idea. But I found the earliest mention of Arkhan Land in a White Dwarf issue 245, which had a large special on the Land Raider in it. That issue came out during 3rd edition 40K, back in May 2000. So while this is over a decade after the introduction of the Land Raider itself, it's most definitely not a recent introduction. Anyway, sorry about that tangent, but I think the best moment to address this was right after we talked about all the shit that got named after him. So, to get back into the spirit of things, let's talk about Arkhan's monkey.
Monkey.
So, as we mentioned before, Arkhan had a pet Psyber-Monkey. Now let me quickly clear up why I keep saying Psyber instead of Cyber, because I can already hear you think that I am just stupid. I mean, maybe, but that's not the point. Sapien is something called a Psyber familiar. This means that the creature is psychically linked to its owner. Now, Arkhan was by no means a psyker, so the link was probably just Bluetooth instead of psychic. Sapien was not, like you might first think, a robot or cyborg. He was actually an engineered clone. This means that, because Arkhan didn't have intact DNA samples, he tried to basically make various parts and then build a barrier together using kinda intact references they found from old Earth. You might think it's easy to just find an old book somewhere, but you gotta remember that at this point old Earth had just suffered almost 10,000 years of nuclear war and everything from the old world was either destroyed or jury-rigged to serve in the war effort between techno-barbarians. And a book? That's either food or toilet paper. Probably both. Now, the best part, Sapien is based upon a spider monkey. But because Arkhan couldn't find complete references, he expertly deduced that the monkey's tail had to be similar to a scorpion's stinger, which you might have noticed already on the picture. Because it was obvious that monkeys use their tail to lash at enemies and puncture them to deliver venom. There were actually quite some tech priests, including fellow magos, that proposed that maybe the monkey used their tail to grip and swing from tree branches instead. After hearing something this retarded, Arkhan maturely replied with,
"You're not just wrong, you're stupid. Now wait just a minute. And you're ugly, just like your mum."
Apart from that, Arkhan constructed the monkey to the most exact specifications to be as close as possible to its biological template. Except that he somehow saw it as absolutely necessary to give the monkey recording equipment instead of eyes. He even refused to give Sapien a voice box or binary communicator cause monkeys don't have that. Much to his annoyance when Sapien got into a particularly bad mood and started throwing his shit everywhere and on everyone. Monkeys usually do not have high definition cameras for eyes either. So what the hell, Arkhan? Anyway, after all this monkey business, let's continue with what Arkhan got up to during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. At the start he actually just continued digging holes. Though he would soon be dragged out of his favorite holes to help the Emperor personally. Big E had become aware of Arkhan Land after all his discoveries. I mean, kinda hard not to notice if your golden boys suddenly start flying and zipping all over the place. So he personally requested Arkhan to aid him with his angriest of boys, Angron. Arkhan diagnosed Angron, and then declared that Angron was a lost cause, irreparable damage, and a hopeless undertaking that would only cause any and all resources invested into him to be a waste. Oh, and that he also had nails in his head that were gonna kill him. Arkhan was unable to help, cause removing Angron's nails would instantly kill him cause they were crudely hammered into his brain. Which means the slavers of New Syria must have had incredible aim to hit something that small.
Well done.
It's worthy of note that Arkhan Land considered both the Astartes and the Primarchs to be vile mutants. He really didn't like them, and if Big E would have given him the chance, he would have pulled the plug on Angron right then and there. This is based on his ideology that humanity is the embodiment of perfection, and trying to improve it is pure hubris. And while he did think that the Emperor was the Omnissiah, he thought of the Astartes and Primarchs more as abhumans that shouldn't exist. When the Horus Heresy started and Mars was having its own little civil war, the Emperor wanted Arkhan Land and other high-ranking members of the Mechanicum to be instantly evacuated to Terra, for safekeeping.
Nigga, is you gonna give it back?
The Imperial Fists, led by Sergeant Nicanor Tullus, picked him up, but on the way to their craft, a Vorax-class robot attacked them. Cause the Dark Mechanicum would rather see him dead at this point, rather than see him help the Loyalists. Tullus sacrificed himself so Arkhan and the other toaster fuckers could escape. Back on Terra, the Loyalist Fabricator General Kane, who became Fabricator General in name only after the real one, Kel Bohal, decided that the Imperium was cringe, for nerds, and he wanted to join Horus instead. Well, Kane fucking hated Arkhan. Cause like I mentioned before, Arkhan was a bit of a massive dick. But he still needed Arkhan's help with Marcus Domina Hieronymus' plan to ascend into the Archimandrite. basically a huge fuck off killer robot, but since AI was outlawed, the second best thing was to just upload yourself. The robot also had some really neat beam weapons, designed by Arkhan himself as a free upgrade. Following that, he joined the Custodes and Archimandrite into the Webray War against hordes of demons, after Magnus did, once again, a fucky wucky and destroyed the Webray project. This was the first time that Arkhan met demons, which weren't too impressed by his display of facts and logic. This was Arkhan's real first encounter with shitting his pants. When that chapter of his life was over, he actually became really good friends with a Blood Angel Dominion named Zephon, despite his disdain for Astartes. Zephon himself had a huge problem that all his bionic limbs kept being rejected by his body. Yeah, should have thought about that before you lost your default ones, buddy. Kids these days, they don't take care of the stuff. Anyway, Arkhan helped him by, well, doing a little tech heresy by installing a little device that was totally not abominable intelligent into his brain, that originated from the dark age of technology. Goes to show you just what influence this man had when he basically just had that thing with him while being a war refugee. Of course, Arkhan leveraged this to get a personal audience with Sanguinius, probably to get the angel to go free Mars, so he can go back to digging holes. He was shit out of luck though, cause pretty much right after that, the war for Terra started, so Sanguinius was kinda busy. During the actual siege of Terra, as in on planet with bombs and shit, he declared he was too important to die and wrestled his way inside a convoy heading for the Sanctum Imperialis, after the loyalists kept losing more and more ground. There he patched Dominion Zephon back together. He's like what, on his 5th set of limbs now? When he finally made it back to the Sanctum Imperialis, he was pretty much immediately told to go fight. Yes, fight at the Eternity Gate. He survived this, narrowly, but they had killed the Psyber-Monkey Sapien. Which actually took a huge toll on Arkhan's mental state. After that he was finally led into the Sanctum proper, where he and the rest of the important Mechanicum peeps waited out the Siege of Terra. After the Siege of Terra, Arkhan returned to Mars to help rebuild. He was already a Magos since quite some time and could probably have easily climbed the ranks. But he wanted to go back to his true calling: digging holes. He led a second large-scale expedition into the Librarium Omnis, but that one did not return. It took 2 centuries after the expedition got lost till anyone found any evidence of where they went. A Vox recording by Arkhan Land himself, which was a pure horror story, where he explains that his entire expedition was being wiped out man by man, toaster by toaster, by some unknown creature. It's never discovered what this was. Arkhan himself thought it was a creature of psychic nature, but it could have been some abomination left by the Dark Mechanicum after the Civil War on Mars. Or even a rogue machine with AI that went crazy over the millennia. We'll probably never know for sure. While that is the gruesome end of Arkhan Land as a person, his legacy lives on in not just the vehicles named after him, but an entire cult following. These followers call themselves the Landites or Landists, depending on who you ask and how much of a lisp they have. They seek to not only discover more STCs, but also improve STCs that he found. This is for example how we got the Land Raider Prometheus. Though this cult has gotten in hot water recently. They claim to have discovered a Great Crusade era vehicle that must be somewhere between a Predator and a Land Raider in terms of raid class. The problem is they want to take apart the schematics of the Land Raider and Predator because they believe that this vehicle was made up from parts used from both. Taking apart schematics is of course ultra heresy, so most of whom suggested got condemned to arco-flagellation. There's also a conspiracy, cause of course there is, that the inner circle of the Landists already have the blueprints for a new vehicle, but are keeping it a secret and to themselves. It's not known if that secret vehicle is the one mentioned earlier or something completely different. So that's about it on the history of Arkhan Land. It has to be said that I was forced to skim over a few topics, especially the ones that take place during the Siege of Terra. So if you're interested in finding out more about Arkhan Land as a character, definitely check out Master of Mankind and Echoes of Eternity. He shows up in a few more books, but those are the big ones. So that's it for today's video on Arkhan Land. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like and consider subscribing to show me I did a good job.
Good job!
And give me free dopamine if I see that number tick up. If you got an idea for another topic I should cover, then don't hesitate to leave it in the comments. The more niche, the better. Anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time, cheers!